Hello, this is Hallie Warner, Chief of Staff at Adam Hergenrother Companies. I'm always fascinated by how founders and leaders work together with their right-hand partners to turn ideas into action and build wildly successful businesses. I've worked alongside a multi-passionate visionary leader for over 10 years, growing multiple thriving companies along the way. And we actually wrote a book about how we leveraged our strategic partnership to achieve success called the Founder and the Force Multiplier, which you can find on Amazon. Today, I wanted to bring you another real-life example of a founder and a force multiplier partnership. My guests are Paige McPheely, CEO, and Natalie Turner, Executive Assistant. Through a passion for bringing people together, meticulous attention to detail, and the ability to organize chaos, Paige co-founded 33 Vincent, a remote executive assistant agency with her longtime friend Casey. Together, they recruited top talent and attracted high-profile clients, growing the company organically and sustainably to employ over 50 contract executive assistants who serve busy executives across the country. Years of experience with executive assistants outlined common pain points and needs in their workflow. EAs lacked software of their own, a strong community, and a trusted source for training and resources. With a genuine desire to serve the executive assistant community, Paige turned her attention to creating a solution, Base. With its release in 2019, Base aims to improve workflows for EAs and uplift them along the way. Paige is CEO of Base and remains an advising partner for 33 Vincent. She currently lives in Greenville, South Carolina with her husband, Matt, and their 3 sons, Jones, Sam, and Bennett. And Natalie has had a background in event planning and operations at a tech startup. Natalie found a natural progression from that into an EA role at a SaaS company alongside Paige. She is well aware she completely lucked out having the opportunity for her first EA position to be supporting the CEO of a company built to champion and empower assistants. She also has her own business as a certified leadership coach and breathwork facilitator, with a focus in helping leaders and visionaries build relational and emotional intelligence so that they can lead effectively and live fully. You can learn more about Paige and Natalie and their work at Base at basehq.com. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to get more tips for founders and force multipliers. You can just hit the subscribe button below and let me know what you think of this interview by leaving a comment. Thanks for watching. All right. Thank you both so much for being here, Paige and Natalie. Paige, I feel like I've known you kind of through various channels for several years now.
Mm-hmm.
And Natalie, you and I have chatted on and off for a couple of years as well. Let's do a quick jumpstart question. Which 3 apps can you not live without?
Personal or professional?
Ooh, either one. I like a little bit of both.
For me, it's super simple, but the voice notes app on my phone, I'm constantly voice noting myself. And then in tandem with that, I use an app called Otter that transcribes it. In case I need to get all those thoughts or whatever it is I'm recording into written form. Just a straight up notes app on my phone. Again, I know kind of boring, but it's everything in my brain has to live somewhere. So it goes in one of those 2 places. We live and die by Front for email. That's the app we use for email. And it integrates and plays really nicely with Base too. So that's why we do that.
What was the name of the email app?
It's called Front.
Oh, okay. Front. Yes. Awesome. Yeah. I'm sensing a theme with your apps there, Natalie.
Yeah. It's a little thematic.
Mm-hmm. Front is definitely one of mine. Slack. We're a fully remote team, so it's how we communicate with everybody on the team. And then I vacillated a little bit for the third one. I think Roam is one that I really like. It's a note-taking app, but you can hyperlink out to other things and connect the dots, and it's meant to function like a second brain. I don't use it as well as I should for that, but it's really valuable. And then I change a lot, but some form of podcast app. Right now I'm using Air, which is nice because you can save some quotes from them and annotate them and share them easily. And
I need to look at that. That sounds good.
Yeah, me too. What podcast are you listening to right now that you're loving?
It's all over the place. I'm a big fan of The Times Daily. I'm a really big fan of We Can Do Hard Things by Glennon and sister and Abby, which I know we're not supposed to call her sister anymore. And Dr. Huberman has a podcast that I love, and it blows up my brain, and it's very sciencey and smart, but really, really good. And Armchair Expert.
Amazing. I hadn't heard of that one, so I'll have to check it out. Right. So for those of the listeners who don't know about BASE, or not familiar with BASE yet, could you give us a little history of BASE, how you got started and brought it to where it is today?
Yes, absolutely. So I frequently think of myself as sort of an accidental entrepreneur. That's not what I've always wanted to be my whole life, certainly. And yet have found myself starting 2 different companies. So almost 8 years ago, I started a remote executive assistant staffing agency called 33 Vincent. Started it with a good friend of mine, Casey Putschoegl, and I wish that I could share. We had all these like grand visions of growing this big business, but really we saw a need and we felt like we were in a pretty unique place to fill that need. We were both new parents. I was laid off from my job in advertising, and we both have very operational logistics kinds of minds. We're like, let's start freelancing some of the things that we're really good at. And almost immediately, the business just was, the referrals were pouring in, and our clients are, 2 clients for the 6 clients, and all through word of mouth. And we're like, oh, ding, we could actually do something here. And so it took us maybe 3-4 months to really, really put those pieces together and figure out that what people were coming to us for was executive assistant work, but they were doing it in a remote fashion. And back then, there weren't a lot of remote assistants. We would hear a ton about virtual assistants, but that was a very different product offering than what we were providing. We were slotting into these organizations as fully integrated team members, offering higher level, more strategic support, not reactive, not, task takers or list checkers, whatever you want to call it. And so that business just kind of kept growing all by itself. We were doubling or tripling in size year after year until 2018. We had an 8-month wait list of clients just banging down our door, but we could not find the assistants fast enough. We couldn't hire fast enough. I know that's not a unique problem at all, but I think the role of the assistant added some unique challenges to it. The role can oftentimes not have a very clear definition. A lot of times people don't really know what you're talking about when you're talking about assistant. And then the path to becoming an assistant is kind of murky. Frequently, we hear people just kind of fall into it. One opportunity opened some door, and then you find yourself here as an assistant, not a lot of training, no, very limited degree programs, all the things. And so we were frustrated, leaving money on the table. We're like, why can't we unlock this? Why can't we standardize what it looks like of how to become an assistant and then how to do the assistant work? Because the other piece of the puzzle is everybody was working on an hourly basis. And so frequently people would come to us and they're like, I sat at my desk for 12 hours. I worked 12 hours and I billed 9.5 or 10. So then they're frustrated because they're not able to charge for all of that time because there was context switching and they're having to get organized and just a lot of behind the scenes inefficient time. I don't want to call it wasted time, but time that they couldn't say like, this is actual work. And then of course, 33 Vincent couldn't charge the client for that time either. So we were like, oh, okay, we know exactly the type of software that we believe should exist out there. And we'd been waiting a couple of years for someone to build it. And it didn't seem like anyone was really even thinking about it. And so in 2018, I stepped away from that business. She's still running it. Slowly, day by day, figured out how to raise a little bit of money, found some investors, built up a team, and we started building BASE at the very end of 2018. So here we are.
Yeah, that's so amazing how you saw the different needs and went to solve them. I mean, I know that's what everyone says, how everyone says you should build a business, but very few people actually do that. They go and they're like, I think this would be amazing in the world, and let's just hope somebody actually
what someone should do.
Yeah. What happened with, I'm just curious, so what was the process like from raising funds to the actual launch? Like, what was the time frame from that, and at what point did you and Natalie start working together?
Mm-hmm. So we officially started the business at the very end of 2018, raised a pre-seed amount, a small amount, enough to allow us to start hiring, figure out how do we even look for a software engineer? Who should that be? What's that process look like? How do we build a product roadmap? All the many, many things. That was in very early 2019. And so from that point, we actually got a product out into the world within 30 days. It was very, very fast. And it was not a product that we use now. It's not a great product, but it was something that we were like, we need to test the waters. We knew it was going to be really, really important for us to work closely with assistants, with our users, to have that constant back and forth dialogue over what do you need? What are the pain points that you feel? And then let's actually go build it for you. And so that can be a slow process, but ultimately one that I really believe in. And so Natalie joined right when we were starting to raise our seed round. So what month, do you remember what month that was? I'm sure it's seared into your brain.
June 2019.
2019.
Okay, cool. So about 2 years now.
Yeah.
Been working together. Awesome.
Mm-hmm. And so she jumped in to chaos, pure chaos, which maybe you can tell us a little bit about your perspective.
Like what was that like, and what did the first 30 days look like for you?
I know that there's that phrase, drinking from a fire hose. And that is a little bit of what it felt like, jumping in the middle of, not really in the middle of, really at the beginning of really raising a round of funding, which I had never done before. Paige had never done before. And so it was, us learning together as we're also building out our relationship together. And so that was, I feel like it wasn't as hard as it should have been. I think that one thing that Paige and I have going for each other is, or have going for us is, we've sort of just been able to communicate well right off the bat. I know that it's not to say that we don't work at it, but it's just something that kind of came naturally, which has done wonders for us.
What does that communication, it's always a sticky point for, I think for executives and executive assistants or chiefs of staff, this communication. What does it look like from a tactical perspective for the two of you?
I think that also being, remote first was a thing as well. I started, and it was many months before I ever met Paige in real life. And so I think having a lot of our communication over video, over Slack, obviously utilizing Base, was helpful because for me, I had never, and I can go into a little bit more of this, but I had never been an executive assistant before. I'd been in kind of adjacent roles, but having this software that kind of worked as guardrails for me and kind of taught me, here's how you communicate with your executive. That was helpful. But then I think just tactically, it's interesting because I would say some of it's tactical, but a lot of it's emotional intelligence, it's relational. Like part of it is this, like, we just get along, like our personalities mesh well together, and you can't really engineer that. I don't think.
Are you the type of partnership who have the 5-minute calls every morning, or do you meet once a week and that's enough?
So we meet once a week on Zoom. Every once in a while, something will come up and I'll be like, do you have a few minutes? But more often than not, because of how we've set up Digest, which we use through Base, which is like a daily kind of check-in, and then Slack. We don't really have that need for 5-minute check-ins. We do usually like, hey, how are you? What are you doing? But that's normally just Slack and care for one another.
I'd say we're in pretty constant communication, but we don't need a video chat or the equivalent of dialoguing, because I think from the very beginning, and this is a big part of the thought process behind even figuring out what Base would do. So it's helped us, like those guardrails she was talking about, is be clear on the flow of different types of information. So if I have a meeting, we have a process for her to figure out what actions need to be taken after that. If I'm prepping for a meeting, we have a similar process for that, for scheduling, all the things like we've talked about what can work for both of us. So we don't have to transfer all that much information. It's just the crucial pieces, and we know when and how to do that.
This might be kind of a silly question because the software that you created. However, I'm going to ask it anyway. I know a lot of executives don't. I guess I'm curious, like, what's your involvement, Paige, as an executive in Base versus Natalie's? I know a lot of executives don't ever want to touch software. So do they have to, or what does that look like?
It's not a silly question at all. We get it all of the time. I have to, let me back up. Base is designed for the assistant, period. The executive receives outputs of Base. So like Natalie said, I get a daily digest from her detailing what's coming up on my schedule, any prep I need to know, any questions she has for me, which we've got this really cool feature that you can bake into your digest where she might have 3 questions for me. And within each of those questions, she will put in a handful of proposed answers. So it's really, really fast for me to something as simple as like, what did you think of the lunch order that you had today, all the way down to like, how'd you progress on your goals this week? So it's a wide spectrum, but then also things that she's working on, not a list of everything she's done. I don't need to see that massive list. I want to know, like, where do we stand on the big projects? What's complete? What's in progress? What's coming up on her docket? So I saw in my digest this morning, she's already got holiday planning and reviews going. And like, that's great to know. So that's something, if I think of it in the middle of the night of like, oh my gosh, we have to start thinking about the holidays, I already know she's got it covered. And so I get that every single day. And the questions that I mentioned, decision stream, but that's it. So for me to use Base as an employee and a team member on the Base team, I have to carve out extra time to make sure that I'm getting in there because it's not built for me, but I need to make sure I know the product that we're building and that we're out there selling and getting in the hands of users. So
yeah, brilliant. I knew that you had a solution for that. Because I've seen the digest too, but I was just curious, do you ever really have to go as the CEO, right? Or the leader of the company, do you ever have to go in? Because we know that they're most likely never going to do that.
We would be doomed.
That problem.
Yeah, we would be absolutely doomed. I'd say maybe a third, maybe a little bit more than that of our users, executives, I think would really love and benefit from an executive version of it. So I want to go see all of my past digests, or I want to have this kind of, I think of it like a bat phone with my assistant. It would be a mobile app where I could answer my decision streams and, all of those sorts of things. But really, that's the number one fear that we get from assistants. Like either my exec's not tech savvy, or they have tools that they already like, or I can't change their habits. Like, don't worry. You don't even have to send them any output. I mean, it's really valuable if you do, but some of our users just use it to keep their tasks organized and keep calendar in there. And it doesn't have to be anything that your executive even sees.
As you were talking about the seed funding specifically, right, when you, Natalie, when you joined, you were like, I've never done it before. Paige, you said you've never done it before, and you were diving into this new world, these new projects. I always think that executives and executive assistants are really often working on a lot of the same things. They're just doing different parts of them. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, what do your 2 roles look like? I do imagine you're working on a lot of the same things. I mean, you're obviously on this podcast together and you're doing a lot of the same things, but how do you divide the work and where do your 2 focuses lie?
So mostly I see my role as, okay, what do I need to either clear out of the way or make sure is in place so that Paige can do what she needs to do. So a lot of that for me is looking like, what decisions can I take off her plate, or what can I distill down to the simplest thing? What prep does she need? It's a lot about asking the next question. What can I do for Paige so that she doesn't have to think, because she's already decision fatigued. What can I do so that she can just show up, do the things that she needs to do, and then not think about it anymore afterward? So a lot of it is, the before and after, whether that's the scheduling itself, the correspondence, that kind of thing. And then even kind of the things we think less about, like the mental space, the making sure she's eaten, that kind of stuff, so that she just gets to show up and do what she gets to do. That's kind of how I look at it. But you have anything to add?
No, it's one of my favorite analogies that a really great assistant helps point their executive like an arrow and helps make sure that path to them executing their goal when the arrow flies is is clear and is on target. And so my goals are Natalie's goals. She needs to know them. She needs to deeply understand them. She needs to know her role within those goals. And we spend a lot of time talking about that on a weekly basis. What are the goals? What are the priorities? So that if she doesn't have that context, if she doesn't have that information, she's not going to be able to clear the path at all. And I think that's, at least in my conversations with many assistants over the years, it seems like that's where things break down a lot. We don't have access to the right information, to the right context. So, in general, which direction your executive wants to go, but I don't know the specifics, and I don't know exactly how I can be a point of leverage for you. And you're never really going to unlock the true potential unless you open the pathway for that. And it has to be intentional. So that's a big thing for us.
How did you do that for Natalie? Was it through those weekly meetings? Is it through BASE? Is it something else?
Yes.
It's a combination. So we early on, once we got really clear that I absolutely have to be aware of Paige's goals and the progress she's making on them, we set up a weekly cadence in advance of our one-on-ones. So I'll send a decision stream with two questions. What progress did you make on your goals this week? And because of the second question, I already know what those are, so I could list them out so she has them in front of her. And then what are your priorities for next week? And kind of in combination with that, what would feel like winning? Because a lot of these goals, they might span an entire quarter, they might span a whole year. It was important to me to not only just help make sure that Paige was making progress, but for it also for her to feel that. Because sometimes if you're in a week where you're like, I just sat in meetings all week and I don't know what I did. So for me to be able to sort of provide a touch point of what tangible progress did you make? What would feel like winning, so that you can know in advance, oh, I actually did make progress toward this week. So I do those 2 questions in decision stream that come in a digest. And then those are some of the bullet points in our agenda for our one-on-one. If there's things we need to go into in more depth, we do that there. But a lot of what we're also doing is making sure that the little kind of tiny logistics are covered in digest or are covered in decision stream, so that our one-on-one meetings can be strategic in that way. They can be goal oriented. So yeah, it's both for sure.
Yeah, I love that. I do think too often people are using their executives and their assistants often use that one-on-one time for all of the minutia far too much. And what you just said is the complete solution for that, whether it's something like BASE or even as simple as the more basic thing, like just an email, but just doing that stuff outside of those meetings, because the meetings are where the magic happens with the partnership, but also with the growth of the organization, in my opinion.
Yeah, completely agree. We just had a webinar. Is that September? I can't remember what month it was. Not our most recent webinar, but the one before that, which maybe we could include it in the show notes or something. Absolutely, it was about how to do a one-on-one meeting well. And Natalie hosted it. And it was, I think, our most successful webinar to date. People definitely loved it.
Well attended.
The feedback, the comments, the questions, it was unbelievable. And she just covered what she does. And that's the premise basically for the whole conversation. This is your time to own. And if you're not making sure that it's productive time, then it's going to be the first meeting to be like, hey, can we bump this meeting? Or it's just going to disappear off the calendar. I spoke with an assistant the other day who hadn't gotten FaceTime with her executive since May. Wow. And there were a lot of extenuating circumstances there, but it's not uncommon either.
Oh, yeah, I would say it's very common, and it is always the first meeting to get pushed. I'm curious, out of the attendance and the audience that you had for that one-on-one, and we experience this too in our business. I find that the assistants are the ones who are attending all of this and getting all of this amazing information, and many of them are bringing it back to their executives and to their organizations. But from your perspectives, how do we get CEOs and executives to get up to also be hearing this more frequently and to understand what you understand, Paige, and to understand what Adam understands? How do we bring them into the fold more so that they're actually also being advocates for what we teach assistants?
There's a lot of layers to that answer, and I'm going to probably miss some of them, but I think the simplest form of it is changing the conversation. And that's like this conversation that we're having right now, and of getting more executives aware that there is a way to work with anybody on your team that supports you, that outsourcing is actually very, very smart. It is the right way to do business, no matter what you're outsourcing. Like, this is the way that our businesses gain the most leverage. So having this broader conversation around support being good and we all deserve support and all of these things can, I think, lead the way to more people being supported with assistance, more people feeling comfortable getting things off their own plate. And how many people that are not on that more commonly seen path of getting an assistant feel like, no, I don't need one, or worse, I don't deserve one. Mm-hmm. And so just having the conversation, more people talking about their support, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. I'm sure you've seen this too, but I've lost count, especially when I was at 33 Vincent, where we were working more closely with the executives, hundreds and hundreds of conversations of these individuals saying, I don't know how to work with an assistant. I don't know where to start. I don't know any of these things. And so we did it. Yeah. Like, or, I'm expecting 10 hours a week of support, but I don't have enough to give them. Oh my gosh. So tons of training of, here's what a partnership can look like. Okay, great. They're scheduling your meetings, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. And so, yeah, that's a very vague answer, but I think as the future of work continues to evolve, and as we start to see the workplace change beyond just even remote, but we see roles change, I'm expecting people to continue to be hired for what. So I think future employees are going to need to know what they're very good at. And once they know what they're really good at, they're going to probably feel more comfortable not doing the things that are not like fitting within that sweet spot. And that's where I think assistance, but also just delegation and outsourcing is going to really come into play.
Yeah, for sure. Where did you, in both of your businesses, I suppose, but maybe with Base specifically, at what point in the growth of your organization did you feel like you as the CEO needed an assistant? And what did, like, and then how quickly did you make that hire, and how did you and Natalie find each other?
Yeah. So I'll start with 33 Vincent first. That took a long time, where we had this realization, Casey and me, like, we are running this business. We're not owning this business. And like, why are we stretching ourselves so thin? I mentioned we are both new parents. In the span of, I think, our first 3 years, maybe 3.5 years, we each had 3 children. So we had 6 newborns, and we were constantly, somehow we staggered them. I don't know how, but we were constantly just covering for one another and juggling and dealing with this growing business. And like, it was like an aha moment where we're like, oh, like, we could actually get support that we are out there ranting about all day long. So once I turned that corner, I've not looked back at all. So right when starting Base, like, we've got to bake an assistant into the budget immediately. And that is not common for pre-seed venture, especially tech organizations, because you're so far from profitability. Like, you can't even see it way out in the distant future because of the venture model, that it was blowing the minds of our investors. It's like, well, if any business is ever going to be able to convince an investor to do this, it's going to be our business, and we're going to do it. And then we're going to make the case along the way of how Natalie has increased my leverage. We've become a more successful business because she's here. And in doing so, we've kind of been able to define the ROI. I mean, that's a mushy thing, but we're working on it.
Yeah.
And we actually found Natalie through 33 Vincent.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I mean, how perfect. What was the language that you used to tell your investors how important hiring that EA was? I just know there's a lot of people listening to this who are going to be like, they need that ammunition.
Yeah, there's a lot of cultural baggage around, I alluded to this earlier, who deserves an assistant. And I think our C-suite, we support them pretty well. Our VPs, we support them pretty well. But when you get into entrepreneurs, small business owners, and then middle managers and really any other knowledge workers, what we call it internally, like our software engineers, our designers, our marketing leaders, they all need help and none of them are getting it. And so this is the very reason that we exist. Like, yes, we want to provide software, but that's really step one for us. The next step for us is expanding the market, is seeing more people being supported and feeling supported, whether they're an assistant and they're feeling supported by the community we've built and the software that we've built, or they're the people now working with an assistant because we've helped them realize, hey, I do deserve this help and I can actually be more productive. So I wouldn't say that there was a specific conversation where it was like, here's what we need, but because they invested in us, they were kind of like, okay, we can't fight this. We're going to have to do this.
What are the 2 or 3 things where you focus your time, Paige? Natalie's taking care of a lot. And which allows you to focus on, your 1, 2, 3 things. What are those?
Yeah. So my role is actually pretty simple when it comes down to that. Number one is out there trying to talk about our brand, to represent the brand. Getting to do stuff like this is really, really exciting for me. And it's that big, long game of changing the conversation. That's what really, really gets me excited about it. So it's a big part of my role that is very hard to define, but is one of those things that if it falls as a potential on the schedule, then Natalie knows to make a priority for it. The second piece of it is our team culture. So making sure that the people that we bring on the team have the resources that they need, that they're helping us to grow our culture, making sure that our leaders feel supported. The leaders on our team are my top priority, to make sure it's my job to enable their success. I believe I've put them in place. I need to trust them to do their job. How can I now let them do it and enable their success? The third piece of it is money, which can either be helping to support the sales efforts. We now have a sales team, which is really, really great, but for a while we didn't. So that was a big part of my role, but also fundraising, making sure we've got the capital coming in that can support our operations and all of that. So it's very simple. And those 3 things have remained present. It was one of the first things I did, was define those 3 things. But what that looks like tactically has changed so dramatically over time.
But I love that clarity that you have, that it is those 3 things.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And I probably could blend the last 2. Like,
yeah.
My team needs to have the resources that they need, whether it's people or money or whatever.
Sure.
Yeah.
Can you take us back to a couple of years when you were first starting, or maybe you could talk about your other company as well, but what were some of the biggest mistakes you made in the early days of the company and any of the big lessons that you learned?
Yeah. So with 33 Vincent, it took us a while to figure out what to call ourselves. We knew pretty early on the type of support and services that we needed to sell out there in the market, but we weren't charging nearly enough. And we didn't have a very clear message over what we were selling. Once we figured that out, it really, really, really started to grow. And we figured out the right rate too. It turns out that for that market, charging, it's not a crazy rate at all, but it was a higher price than what else was out there. Ended up being a really good thing, because then we brought in clients who were taking it seriously. They wanted to win with their assistant, and that really mattered to us. Similar-ish mistakes on the base side, where figuring out, how do we talk about this? What's the language for this? We're really creating a category. And so like software for assistants is not defined at all. Selling to assistants is like basically never been done in this way. They get all sorts of other things, but not this. There are no budgets set aside for us. And so there's a lot of figuring out how do we even talk about this? And it took us a little while to find our voice, I would say. That's something I would definitely do differently.
Have you and Natalie had any specific challenges working together, or difficult conversations that you've had to have, and how have you addressed those?
Yes. So maybe I'll let Natalie answer this, but the short answer is we have not had any massive conflicts at all. I'd say our biggest challenge is figuring out who owns what. Like our brains work our brains work very similarly, but I talk to think. And so in our one-on-ones, I'm just talking and brain dumping on her, and she's got this amazing system to get it all down. But because I'm talking to think, I sometimes can make inferences when I'm talking to think. And then I'm assuming she understands that means she's going to own that, even though I, didn't actually say that to her. And so that happened to us last week.
Yeah. It's the distinguishing when Paige is like, oh, I need to do this and I need to do that. Does that mean you need to do it, or I need to do it as you? It's yeah. Knowing that. And I think also, just the nature of working at a startup, when the lines around a lot of things can just feel a little blurrier and mushier. And I've worked at tech startups previously in operations, and there's sort of this idea of like everything is everyone's job in a way. Like we're all team players here, and we are, but it can get interesting of who owns what things, where should I jump in, where do I need to stay in my lane, so it's just navigating that too. I wouldn't say it's been a challenge per se. Like Paige said, we don't really have any drama, but it has just been a process of figuring that out together, and lots of conversations. Hey, I think I'm understanding this, but I just want to clarify, is this the expectation here? Mm-hmm. And a simple conversation like that can really help.
She's so patient with me. Also, I cannot recall information to save my life. And it's like the things that I have been good at in the past, I'm no longer good at. I don't know if it's just like information overload in my brain or whatever. And so I'm like, who is this person? What is going on? I'm just having a hard time recalling it. And she has got a system. She knows everything. And she's very, very patient with me. So that's probably why we have no drama.
So what, Natalie, whether this is true or not, I don't know, but have you ever is there ever been a decision that Paige has made that you haven't agreed with, or just a disagreement in the company? And how do you address it? Or Paige, how do you want your team members to address it? I just find that is a common challenge with the strategic partnerships, where there is, I don't want to say conflict by any means, but there's certainly areas of disagreement. And how do you work through that? And do you want that sort of disagreement and challenge?
I think that partially because of how we work together, being so goal oriented, as we've been discussing, for me, if anything ever comes up, I don't think there's ever been an instance where I'm like, she's making the wrong call. That's not it. But if there's anything I ever have questions about, and this has happened, where I'll kind of point back to, hey, you've said that this is the priority right now, and this kind of thing we're discussing maybe it isn't in line with that. Is that still the way you want to go with this? And so it's kind of pointing her back to what we've already established as here's what we're doing. So that makes it easier for me, because that way it's not well, this is just my opinion, and not that I don't ever get that too. I do sometimes, but yeah, being able to have sort of those what's the word I'm thinking of, like lighthouses to go back to and be like, we're avoiding this. We're not doing that again. Remember? So it's that really helps to have that kind of foundation.
Yeah, which it sounds like goes back to the fact that you guys are intentional about having those conversations in the first place and getting on the same page in terms of priorities, projects, goals. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
which is so critical.
And I really want anybody on the team. In fact, I sent a message out to everybody yesterday saying, like, no question is ever off the table. I may not always be able to give an answer, but I would prefer to have as transparent of an organization as we possibly can. And I don't have all the information, but I'm not going to keep secrets from anybody. And someone took me up on it, and we had a great conversation today. And I don't think that great leaders have all of the answers. I think that a great leader is able to say like, hey, that's the mountaintop where we're going over there, and get everybody excited about going to that mountaintop. But what most people don't talk about is that most leaders are like, I really hope that's the mountaintop that we're supposed to go to. And there's a lot of uncertainty. So the more people that you can surround yourself with that are smarter than you and whatever the thing is that you brought them there to do, the better. So how do we collaborate? How do we drop our egos just a little bit to get the feedback, to get the hard questions, and hopefully come to a better path?
Could not agree more. Adam and I were just talking about that, going into any conversation with curiosity,
beginner's mind, yeah,
and no agenda, like not going there to be right about anything in particular, but being open, curious, and maybe that is the right mountaintop. But if it doesn't end up being the right mountaintop, I hope someone tells us.
Right? Yeah, exactly. I love it.
Paige, what is one key piece of advice that you would give to CEOs and leaders as they are embarking maybe on their entrepreneurial journey?
So many things are flooding my brain right now.
So all of it.
The most obvious one is get the help that you need. This is another thing I told the team yesterday. This has been one of the hardest and most rewarding things I've ever done in my life. So many ups and downs, just even this week alone. It's a roller coaster of emotion constantly. And build the support team. And it's obvious that you're going to need, whatever company you're starting, you're going to need somebody to help you build your cogs, the things that you sell, but get support, get a thought partner in, my recommendation would be an assistant, of course.
Too.
Yeah, but I think that that's really valuable. And I know it feels scary to put that number on your budget or your model, but it's really, really important, and it pays dividends. Beyond that, I would say be the leader that, be authentic. I felt a lot of pressure, especially starting a tech company. Like, I've got to be on Twitter, and I've got to be this certain brand of tech CEO that I'm not. I'm just not. I don't really like social media all that much. I'm not one to plaster myself on places. And I have a life outside of this company. I'm a parent, I'm a wife, I'm all these other roles that I have that are really, really important to me. And I think it's, that's why we see less women in these roles too, because we historically have a bit more roles, and I'm generalizing there, so that's not fair, but be open about that with your team. Be open about the fact that you're working with a team of humans here. And if you want these humans to show up at their job and be happy and productive, then treat them like humans and not a product that you're trying to build.
Natalie, what about you? What advice would you give to assistants, particularly those who are working at a startup or who want to work? I actually know a lot of assistants who want to go work for a startup. So what advice would you give to them?
Treat this role like a relationship, like it is. Like, when I look at my role, I don't see it as, a compilation of the tasks that I do or the things that I manage. I see it as, okay, my role is to support Paige. And that might look different day to day than, these tasks that we typically think of as like, here's what an assistant does. And so, yeah, it's relational for me. And so I would say, treat it like you're building a relationship, and you do that by building trust, by being consistent, by, for me, I'm a big proponent of, I call them uncomfortable conversations, but courageous conversations, if that feels better to you. Just being willing to say the thing, and knowing how to do that with tact and with care. But yeah, you're building a relationship is what I would say.
Okay, I got to just ask you about the whole courageous conversations thing, because that does come up so often, I think, in these partnerships. I also believe in that too. Sometimes we just call them tough conversations, fierce conversations, whatever you want to call them. It's the ones that are uncomfortable and saying the thing that no one else wants to say or address or bring up. How have you, it's not easy. So how have you developed that muscle in order to do that with Paige?
Yeah, I think part of it is I've always sort of had a high threshold for like awkward, like just in general. I'm like willing to be awkward. But I think that one way that I love to invite people to start those uncomfortable conversations or courageous conversations is kind of stating the desired outcome in advance. And what I mean by that is, let's say I want to have a conversation with Paige about, let's say I messed something up and I need to like bring that forward in some way. I might start the conversation with, hey, I want you to know that I want there to be trust here, and I want there to be ownership, and I want there to be open dialogue. And so like, that's my desired outcome, is I want us to leave the conversation feeling like we're good, we have an understanding here. And then I can go into, here's what happened, here's what I intend to do about it, and here's how I hope we can continue forward with trust and all of the things that I said that I was desiring. Or whether it's like, it could be like asking for feedback. It could be anything really. Those tough conversations. I think also just normalizing them, like making them a part of, not that you have to have one every time you have a one-on-one, but knowing that like there is space for feedback here. One thing that Paige did that was incredible is she made a user guide for her, like how to work with me best. And like some of that is, tactical, practical, like here's how I like to communicate best. Slack first, then email, then whatever. But then some of it is also this kind of stuff. If something comes up, I want you to share it with me. And so sort of just setting those expectations in advance as much as you can is helpful. And also knowing that, and I because I hear this a lot because this is a conversation I take part in a lot at Base, is how do you have these uncomfortable conversations, or how do you have these one-on-ones? Part of it is you can reset this at any time. Let's say you've been with your executive for 2 years and you've never had this kind of back and forth, and you want to. You can always just, like I literally say, just make up an excuse. Hey, it's Q4. And I've been evaluating how things have been going, and I want to try some new things moving forward. Or just fill in the blank of like what the reason is that we're going to have this conversation. Now you can always reset it.
I completely agree with that. I say the same thing, that we all grow, evolve, change. We have children, we get divorced, we move. There's different seasons of our lives, right? And that we need to take responsibility for our own careers as assistants, and be willing to rewrite the rules of the relationship, because what may have worked when I was single and had no responsibilities doesn't might not work anymore when different things have changed in my life. And you hopefully you can work and grow together on those. Sometimes you might not, but either way, at least you're operating from the same rule book and the same playbook.
Yeah.
So what are you both working on next?
So we are rolling out I think it's our biggest feature to date. I imagine all the back and forth that happens when you're scheduling a meeting, even more if you're scheduling for more than 2 people, if it's for 3 or more or whatever. So we're building a way to share the availability, keep track of what you've offered to other people, that gets updated in real time to allow people to give you feedback on what works best for them. And then with one click, send it all out to everybody. And it's called, this feature is called Scheduler. That is in beta right now within our product. It's actually in our users' hands. And this has been one of the dreams from the very start. I was a big Sunrise user way back in the day, and they had a tool like this that you could generate a custom link, but only for one-on-one. And then they were bought by Microsoft and closed and like scoured for so long to find a replacement for them. We're just going to build it into Base. And so it's finally here and coming. And that's going to be a really, really big focus for us. And then preparing for our next fundraise is always a big whole thing.
That's awesome. Very exciting. That's going to be a great addition to the platform.
Yeah. So excited. So if any of the listeners want to sneak into the early access, we can probably make that work.
Okay. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Anything else that you wanted to add, Natalie? Helping Paige do all the things?
Yep. Just making sure all those things are happening.
Yeah. I love it. Where can our listeners best connect with you to learn more about you guys, your careers, about BASE, about 33 Vincent, all the things?
All the things. So our website, basehq.com, is a great place to find out a ton of stuff about BASE. You can even give it a try. We've got a free version of it that's, a little bit limited, but give it a try there. Natalie and I are both on LinkedIn. You can find us there. And then of course that links out to 33 Vincent. 33 Vincent's website is 33vincent.com. And we also have a Facebook community that is really, really great and supportive and full of amazing assistants that ask great questions, that are there supporting one another, and also are just funny, great people. I missed something. I'm sure I missed something.
I would just say we also periodically we do BASE Live. So if people want to connect with us more there, sometimes I'm on them. Paige is often on them. Sometimes we do them together. But yeah, more of us there.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you both so much. Loved learning more about your partnership and about how BASE got off the ground. And I'm excited to see what you guys do next.
Thank you so much for having us. It's a pleasure as always.
Thank you. This is super fun.